The suitcase hit the pavement with a wet, hollow thud. Water splashed up, soaking the hem of Hannah Dawson's dress as rain poured harder, as if the sky itself had chosen sides. "Take your trash and get out." The words came sharp and flat from Eric Dawson, his voice loud enough to cut through the storm and the small gathering of neighbors who had paused to stare. Hannah didn't flinch. She stood at the bottom of the townhouse steps, one hand pressed unconsciously against her swollen belly. 8 months pregnant, her other hand empty, trembling slightly in the cold. Behind Eric, a woman in a red coat laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not an awkward one. Cruel, delighted laugh. "Oh my God," Lena Grant said, stepping out beside him, her heels clicking confidently on the stone steps. "She's still standing there like she's waiting for an apology." Hannah slowly lifted her eyes. They weren't angry. They weren't pleading. They were quiet. And that unsettled Eric more than screaming ever could. "If you're done performing," Eric snapped, grabbing another suitcase and hurling it forward, "you can leave. I'm tired of pretending." The suitcase burst open on impact. Baby clothes spilled out onto the rain-soaked sidewalk. Tiny yellow onesie. A folded hospital blanket. A pair of soft white socks. Someone across the street gasped. Hannah inhaled slowly. 3 years. 3 years of silence, patience, and hope compressed into that single breath. If this story already has you hooked, subscribe, because some betrayals don't end in tears. They end in truths powerful enough to destroy everything built on lies. Eric scoffed when she didn't move. "What?" he said. "You thought staying quiet would make me stay married to you forever?" Lena crossed her arms, smirking. "Honestly, Hannah, you should thank him. You were never wife material anyway." Hannah finally spoke. "Is she staying?" The question wasn't directed at Lena. It was directed at Eric. Eric blinked. "What?" "She," Hannah said calmly, nodding toward Lena. "Is she staying here tonight?" Lena laughed again. "Tonight. Sweetheart, I live here now." Something shifted. Not in Eric. In the air. The townhouse door opened sharply. "Eric!" Selene Dawson stormed out, her silk scarf tucked neatly around her neck despite the rain. She took one look at Hannah, standing soaked and pregnant, and her face twisted with disgust. "What is this disgrace?" Selene demanded. "She's leaving," Eric said quickly. "I took care of it." Selene's gaze dropped to Hannah's belly. Her lip curled. "Unbelievable," she muttered. "Still playing victim." Hannah met her eyes. "I'm not playing anything." Selene stepped forward suddenly. And before anyone could react, she spat right into Hannah's face. The sound was soft, but the silence afterward was deafening. Eric froze. Lena's smile flickered. Rain streamed down Hannah's cheeks, washing the spit away before she could even wipe it. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she reached into her coat pocket, pulled out her phone, and dialed a number she hadn't touched in 3 years. She lifted the phone to her ear. "Hello, Dad," Hannah said quietly. "I think it's time." Selene laughed once. Then she noticed Eric's face. The color had drained completely. "Who are you calling?" he whispered. Hannah lowered the phone slightly and looked at him. The rain soaked her hair. Her clothes clung to her body. Her belly rose and fell as she breathed. But her voice didn't shake. "You," she said softly, "never asked who I was before you decided who I wasn't." The call connected. And far away, in a glass office overlooking Manhattan, one of the most powerful men on earth stopped mid-sentence. "Hannah," he said. The rain kept falling. But Eric had already begun to tremble. The rain continued to fall, but no one moved. Selene Dawson's laugh died halfway through her throat when she heard the voice on the other end of Hannah's call. Calm, low, unmistakably authoritative even through the phone's tinny speaker. "Hannah," the man said again. "Are you safe?" Eric swallowed hard. That wasn't the voice of a random father. That wasn't the voice of a man who asked questions before acting. Hannah wiped her face with the back of her hand, more out of habit than emotion. I'm standing outside, she said evenly. In the rain. There was a pause. How far along are you? 34 weeks. Another pause. Longer this time. Selene scoffed, forcing a brittle smile. This is ridiculous, she said loudly, clearly intending to be heard. Whoever you're talking to, tell him to mind his business. This woman has been leeching off my son for years. The voice on the phone changed. Put me on speaker. Hannah did. The words landed like a dropped glass. Eric's chest tightened. Hannah, don't. Selene Dawson, the voice said calmly, pronouncing her name with surgical precision. You just spat on my daughter. The word daughter hit Eric like a blow to the ribs. Selene stiffened. Excuse me. I asked you a question, the man continued. Do you often assault pregnant women, or was today a special occasion? Lena's confidence drained so fast she actually took a step back. Selene laughed again, shrill and forced. This is absurd. My son married a nobody. I did my background checks. Yes, the man replied. You did. Hannah's fingers tightened around the phone. And you missed everything, he added. Eric shook his head. No, this is some kind of manipulation. Hannah finally turned to look at him fully. Not with anger. With disappointment. I asked you once, she said quietly. Just once. To meet my family. Eric scoffed. You said they were dead. I said they were unavailable. The distinction hung between them like a blade. Selene stepped forward again, but her voice wavered. Sir, whoever you are, my family doesn't respond well to threats. I'm not threatening you, the man said. I'm informing you. Car horns sounded down the street. Then another. Black SUVs rolled slowly around the corner, headlights cutting through the rain. One stopped directly behind Eric's parked car. Then a second. Then a third. Lena's breath hitched. Eric! He didn't answer. He was staring at the license plates. Custom government issued. Selene's face drained to a pale, sickly gray. Dad, Hannah said softly. You don't have to come. I'm already there, he replied. The first SUV door opened. A man stepped out in a tailored charcoal coat, rain beating effortlessly off the fabric. He didn't rush. He didn't look around. He looked straight at Hannah. Eric felt his knees weaken. He knew that face. He'd seen it on magazine covers, on economic panels, on charity boards and global summits. James Hale, CEO of Hale Global Consortium. The man whose companies quietly owned the consulting firm Eric worked for. The man whose net worth analysts refused even to calculate. Selene's lips parted, but no sound came out. James Hale walked toward Hannah, ignoring everyone else. He took off his coat, placed it gently around her shoulders. Then, without raising his voice, he said, Who touched you? Selene collapsed. Not figuratively. Her knees buckled, and she went down hard onto the wet pavement, gasping as if the air had been punched from her lungs. Mom! Eric shouted, rushing toward her. James lifted one hand. Two security men moved instantly, blocking Eric's path without touching him. Lena screamed. You can't do this. This is harassment. James finally looked at her. She went silent. He turned his attention to Eric. You, James said, married my daughter for 3 years. Never asked who she was. Never asked why she didn't need your money. Never asked why she paid off your credit cards anonymously. Eric's mouth opened, closed. You let another woman mock her, James continued. You let your mother spit on her. And you threw my grandchild's belongings into the rain. Eric shook. I didn't know. That, James said flatly, is the point. Hannah placed a hand on her father's arm. Dad, she said gently. Please. James exhaled slowly, reining himself in. He turned back to Eric. You want to know who my daughter is? Eric nodded frantically. She is the reason I still believe power should be tested before trusted, James said. She asked me not to interfere. She wanted to know if you were kind when no one was watching. Hannah's voice broke for the first time. I stayed because I hoped I was wrong. Eric fell to his knees. Lena backed away, shaking her head. This is insane. Eric, say something. He couldn't. Because James wasn't finished. You're fired, James said calmly. Effective immediately. Your access to company accounts has been frozen. Your mortgage. He glanced at his phone. Underwater. Your club membership. Revoked. Your mother's medical board donations. He looked at Selene. Returned. Selene sobbed openly now, clutching her chest. James leaned closer to Eric. You confused silence for weakness, he said quietly. And patience for stupidity. If you've ever watched someone mistreat a good person simply because they thought they could get away with it, this is your reminder to subscribe. Some truths don't surface immediately. But when they do, they leave no one untouched. James turned back to Hannah. We're leaving, he said. She nodded. As security escorted them toward the SUV, Eric crawled forward on his hands, rain and tears blurring his vision. Hannah, please, he choked. I'll change. I swear. She stopped, looked back at him one last time. You already showed me who you are, she said softly. I just finally believed you. The SUV door closed. The engines started. As they pulled away, James glanced at his phone. A message flashed across the screen. The audit is complete. James's jaw tightened. Good, he said quietly. Then it's time he learns how deep this really goes. And somewhere behind them, Eric screamed, because he finally understood this wasn't over. It was only the beginning. The SUV doors sealed with a muted thump, shutting out the rain, and Eric. Inside, the world felt eerily calm. Hannah stared straight ahead, her reflection faint in the tinted glass. Her hands rested over her belly, steady now, as if the chaos outside had been a storm she'd already walked through. James watched her in silence for several seconds before speaking. Did he ever hit you? Hannah closed her eyes. Once. More than enough. He grabbed me, she said carefully. When I tried to leave the first time. He said no one would believe me. James's jaw tightened. The muscle near his temple jumped once hard. And you stayed, he said quietly. I wanted to be sure, Hannah replied. Not for him. For me. The SUV pulled away from the curb, tires cutting through rainwater as the townhouse disappeared behind them. In the side mirror, Eric was still on the ground. James picked up his phone. Bring me the full report, he said. Not the summary. Everything. A voice on the other end hesitated. Sure. It's worse than we thought. James smiled thinly. It always is. By the time the convoy reached the hotel, the rain had slowed to a mist. News traveled faster. Inside the lobby, staff froze when they saw James Hale step in, flanked by security. His arm protectively guiding a visibly pregnant woman. Phones appeared. Whispers followed. Hannah felt the weight of the attention, but for the first time it didn't feel like judgment. Felt like protection. James ushered her into a private elevator. Your mother is waiting upstairs, he said gently. Hannah nodded, swallowing past the lump in her throat. But before the doors closed, James's phone buzzed again. He glanced down, then looked back up at Hannah. Eric just tried to access the joint account, he said. Hannah laughed softly. Of course he did. James's expression didn't soften. He drained it. Every dollar. 5 minutes ago. The elevator doors slid shut. Hannah's breath caught. He can't. That money. I know, James said. That's why I let him. She turned sharply. You what? James met her eyes. Because theft is louder than betrayal. Across town, Eric sat in his car, hands shaking as he stared at his banking app. 0. Every account he owned frozen. The joint account. Me. Relief flooded him, quickly replaced by panic. He called his lawyer. Voicemail. He called his bank. A recorded message informed him that his accounts were under review due to suspicious activity. He slammed the steering wheel. No. His phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, he snapped. Mr. Dawson, a calm voice said. This is Special Investigations with Hale Global. We need to ask you a few questions regarding misappropriated funds, falsified expense reports, and unauthorized access to restricted accounts. Eric's stomach dropped. I don't know what you're talking about, he said quickly. We do, the voice replied. And we'll be seeing you shortly. The line went dead. Eric screamed, a raw sound that echoed inside the car. For the first time, the truth landed fully. He hadn't just lost Hannah. He had poked a machine that crushed men without ever raising its voice. Upstairs, Hannah sat on the edge of the bed, her mother's arms wrapped tightly around her. Catherine Hale smelled like lavender and home. You did nothing wrong, Catherine whispered. You hear me? Hannah nodded, tears finally slipping free. I wanted him to choose me, she said. Even when it was hard. Catherine pulled back, cupping her face. The right man doesn't need to be tested to choose kindness. James stood near the window, phone pressed to his ear again. Yes, he said. Authorize it. He ended the call and turned. They're opening a formal investigation, he said. Financial crimes. Domestic abuse. Fraud. Hannah stiffened. I don't want him destroyed. James's voice softened. Hannah, I'm not destroying him. He paused. He's collapsing under the weight of who he already is. Hours later, the story broke. Not on the news. On social media. A leaked memo. A revoked appointment. A quiet resignation was forced through legal channels. And one photograph. Eric Dawson being escorted out of Richardson Consulting by security. His tie crooked, his face gray. The comments were merciless. I knew something was off about him. That poor woman. Men like this always hide behind confidence. If you've ever watched someone get away with cruelty because they thought no one was watching, this is your sign to subscribe. Because silence doesn't protect abusers. Exposure does. Eric saw it all. Alone. Selene's calls went unanswered. Lena had blocked him entirely. He sat on the edge of the bed in the townhouse that was no longer his, staring at the packed suitcases still by the door. Hannah's things soaked and ruined. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a message. From James Hale. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. My office. No threat. No explanation. Just inevitability. Eric's hand shook so badly that he dropped the phone. Because men like Eric always believe the worst is losing money. They never realize the real punishment is still ahead. And as James Hale looked out over the city skyline that night, he made one final call. Schedule the audit presentation, he said. Public. Then he smiled. Because tomorrow, Eric wouldn't just lose his career. He would lose the lie he'd built his entire life on. Morning came without mercy. Eric barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Hannah standing in the rain, silent, watching him become someone he no longer recognized, or maybe someone he'd always been. At exactly 8:47 a.m., he stood in the lobby of Hale Global's Manhattan headquarters, dwarfed by glass walls and quiet efficiency. No receptionist smiled at him. No one asked his name. They already knew it. Mr. Dawson, a woman said, appearing beside him without warning. This way. She didn't wait for him to respond. The elevator ride felt endless. Eric's reflection stared back at him from the mirrored walls. Sunken eyes, unsteady hands, a man stripped of certainty. When the doors opened, he was led into a boardroom larger than his entire townhouse. James Hale stood at the far end, hands resting lightly on the table. He didn't sit. He didn't offer a greeting. Hannah was there. That broke him. She sat beside her mother, composed, her posture calm despite the life growing inside her. She didn't look at Eric when he entered. That hurt more than anger ever could. Sit, James said. Eric did. A screen behind James flickered to life. Spreadsheets filled it. Timelines. Emails. You've been lying since before you met my daughter, James said evenly. About your income. Your debt. Your character. Eric shook his head. I was trying to build something. You were stealing, James corrected. From clients. From your employer. From your wife. Hannah finally turned to him. Not with fury. With clarity. Do you remember the night I asked why you needed my name on the loan? She asked softly. Eric swallowed. We were married. You said it would make us stronger, she continued. But you never once explained why you couldn't qualify a loan. Eric opened his mouth. Nothing came out. James tapped the screen. You forged supplemental income documents. You rerouted funds. You took advantage of Hannah's credit score while hiding your own. Hannah inhaled slowly. I worked nights, she said. I skipped meals. I wore the same clothes for years. I thought we were building a future. Eric's voice cracked. I didn't think it mattered. There it was. The sentence that ended everything. If you've ever given your best to someone who treated it like background noise, subscribe. Because stories like this remind us that neglect can be just as violent as cruelty. James folded his hands. You want to know why my daughter didn't tell you who she was? Eric nodded, tears spilling freely now. She wanted to know who you were, James replied. Without fear. Without leverage. Hannah's voice trembled just slightly. I needed to know if you'd still be kind when you thought I was nothing. Eric sobbed openly. I loved you. No, Hannah said quietly. You loved how I made your life easier. Silence swallowed the room. James pressed a button on the table. The door opened. Two men entered, one in a tailored suit, the other carrying a thick file. Mr. Dawson, the man in the suit said. I'm with the district attorney's office. Eric lurched to his feet. You said this was a meeting. James's gaze was cold. It is. You're just not the one being protected. The file was placed on the table. Domestic intimidation. Financial fraud. Witness statements. Medical reports. Eric's legs gave out. He dropped back into the chair, shaking. I didn't hit her, he whispered desperately. Hannah stood. The room seemed to tilt. You don't get credit for the harm you didn't finish, she said. You still scared me. You still trapped me. She placed a hand over her belly. And you never once asked if your child was okay. The words sliced deeper than any accusation. The DA nodded. Mr. Dawson, you'll be hearing from us. As they escorted him out, Eric twisted back toward Hannah. Please, he begged. Just tell me, was any of it real? Hannah met his eyes. All of it, she said. Until you proved it wasn't. The doors closed behind him. James exhaled slowly, as if releasing years of restraint. But before the room could settle, his phone buzzed. He glanced down. His expression changed. What is it? Catherine asked. James looked at Hannah. Your mother-in-law, he said quietly. She's talking. Hannah's brow furrowed. About what? James turned the screen toward her. A live news clip filled it. Selene Dawson, tear-streaked and shaking, standing outside a courthouse, speaking into microphones. I was deceived, Selene cried. That woman ruined my son's life. She planned this. She married him to destroy us. Hannah's chest tightened. James's jaw hardened. Looks like, he said calmly, she's decided to make this public. Hannah stared at the screen, her hand instinctively tightening over her stomach. Because she knew something Selene didn't. When liars feel cornered, they don't retreat. They burn everything around them. And this time, Hannah wouldn't stay silent. The press didn't wait for facts. They never did. By noon, Selene Dawson's face was everywhere, splashed across screens, framed in righteous outrage, her voice trembling just enough to sound believable. She targeted my son, Selene sobbed into a cluster of microphones. She pretended to be poor. She manipulated him. She destroyed our family. The clip looped endlessly. Hannah watched it from a quiet sitting room. Her hands clenched so tightly together her knuckles ached. Each word felt like a second violation. Public, deliberate, calculated. Catherine reached for the remote and muted the screen. She's lying, Catherine said softly. I know, Hannah replied. But lies travel faster than truth. James stood by the window, already several steps ahead. She wants to shift blame, he said. Classic move when accountability arrives. Hannah looked up. People will believe her. James turned to her. Only if we let her control the narrative. Hannah exhaled slowly, steadying herself. No, she said. I won't hide anymore. James studied her face, the calm resolve, the quiet fire, and nodded once. Then we do this clean, he said. And we do it once. Across town, Selene sat in the back of a black sedan, dabbing her eyes with a silk handkerchief. Her lawyer leaned forward from the front seat. That was effective, he said. Public sympathy is already shifting. Selene straightened, the tears vanishing instantly. Good. I want her reputation ruined. She's very powerful, the lawyer warned. Selene sneered. So am I. People like her don't belong in our world. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You've been recorded. Every word. Every lie. Selene's smile faltered. She typed furiously. Who is this? The response came immediately. Someone who doesn't tolerate abuse dressed up as class. Her hands trembled. That evening, James convened a small, controlled meeting. No press, no spectacle. Just truth. Hannah sat at the center of the table. No designer dress. No jewelry. Just herself. A screen lit up behind her. Emails appeared. Voicemails. Security footage from the townhouse. Selene spit frozen in a single damning frame. Gasps rippled through the room. These are timestamps, James said calmly. Not interpretations. Hannah spoke next, her voice clear. I didn't marry Eric for money. I already had it, she said. I married him because I believed kindness mattered more than status. Pause. I stayed silent because I hoped love would grow where respect was planted. She looked directly at the camera, recording the session. If you've ever been told to endure cruelty to keep the peace, this is your reminder to subscribe. Silence protects abusers, not families. The room was still. Then a reporter asked, why reveal this now? Hannah met the question without flinching. Because my child deserves a world where truth isn't punished. The footage leaked within minutes. This time the internet didn't hesitate. Selene's interview was dissected line by line. Her contradictions surfaced. Her cruelty replayed beside Hannah's restraint. Comments shifted. She's not a victim. She's a bully. That poor woman endured so much. The mother is worse than the son. Selene watched the tide turn from her living room, fury rising in her chest. They're twisting it, she snapped at her lawyer. No, he said quietly. They're seeing it. Her phone rang. Block number. She answered anyway. You should stop, James's voice said calmly. Selene laughed, sharp and bitter. You think you've won. I think you're about to say something you can't take back, James replied. Selene leaned forward, eyes blazing. Then listen carefully. That child. The line went dead. Selene stared at the phone. Outside sirens wailed. A knock thundered at her door. And as Selene rose slowly from her chair, a sudden chilling realization set in. This wasn't a media battle anymore. It was a legal one. And this time there would be no cameras to save her. Selene opened the door with her chin lifted, the mask already sliding back into place. Two officers stood on the threshold. Professional. Unmoved by her posture or her name. Selene Dawson. One asked. Yes, she replied sharply. And I assume this is about the circus my former daughter-in-law has created. We're here regarding statements you made earlier today, the officer said. And a complaint of harassment and witness intimidation. Selene laughed, loud and dismissive. You're joking. The second officer held up a tablet. The screen played audio. Selene's voice. Unmistakable, venomous. That child will be the thing that ends her. Selene staggered back as if struck. That's taken out of context, she snapped. I was emotional. The officer's expression didn't change. Ma'am, that's not a defense. They stepped inside. Selene's lawyer appeared from the hall, pale. Selene, you need to stop talking. But she couldn't. She never could. You don't understand, she insisted, her voice rising. She planned this. She married my son to humiliate us. People like her don't stay quiet unless they're hiding something. The officer tapped the screen again. Security footage filled it, clear, unambiguous. Selene spitting. The moment looped once. Silence followed. Selene's knees buckled. Across the city, Hannah felt a dull ache bloom low in her back. She sat slowly, one hand braced against the armrest, breathing carefully. Catherine noticed immediately. Hannah. I'm okay, Hannah said, though her voice was tight. Just tired. James watched her closely. This ends tonight, he said. Selene was escorted out of her home, not in handcuffs, but in disgrace. Neighbors watched from behind curtains. Phones rose. Whispers spread. Her carefully curated image fractured in real time. At the precinct, she demanded her call. Her lawyer hesitated. Selene, the situation has changed. She glared. Call my son. Eric didn't answer. He tried again. Voicemail. Panic crept in, cold and unfamiliar. What about my board position? She asked, grasping for control. Her lawyer looked away. They've asked for your resignation. Selene laughed weakly. They can't do that. They already did. That night, Hannah lay awake, the city lights flickering through the hotel curtains. She felt the baby shift, a slow, deliberate movement. You're safe, she whispered, though she wasn't sure she believed it yet. James knocked softly and entered. Selene's being formally charged, he said. Harassment. False statements. Witness intimidation. Hannah closed her eyes. I don't feel victorious, she said. I just feel empty. James sat beside her. That's what happens when you stop surviving and start healing. The noise fades. Hannah swallowed. What if she doesn't stop? James didn't answer immediately. Instead, he handed her his phone. A new alert blinked on the screen. Eric Dawson released pending investigation. Hannah's breath caught. Why would they let him go? She asked. Because, James said quietly. He agreed to cooperate. Hannah stared at the words, her pulse quickening. Cooperate meant speak. Speak meant twist. If you've ever watched someone who hurt you suddenly offer the truth, but only to save themselves, subscribe. Because redemption built on betrayal always comes at someone else's expense. James's phone buzzed again. Another message. He's asking to see Hannah. The room felt suddenly smaller. Hannah placed a hand over her belly, steadying herself. No, she said. Not alone. James nodded. He won't be. But even as he said it, his eyes darkened. Because cooperation didn't mean confession. It meant negotiation. And Eric Dawson was finally desperate enough to say anything. Hannah agreed to the meeting under one condition. It wouldn't be private. A neutral room. Glass walls. 2 attorneys. 1 officer standing just close enough to be seen. Eric arrived late. Not fashionably. Desperately. He looked smaller, like gravity had finally started working on him. His suit hung loose. His eyes darting as if every sound might be the one that finished him. When he saw Hannah, he stopped short. For a moment, something like regret flickered across his face. Then it vanished, replaced by calculation. Hannah, he said softly, as if the room might be listening. You look well. She didn't answer. She didn't owe him a conversation. He sat, fingers lacing and unlacing. I didn't know it would go this far. James's lawyer leaned forward. You're here because you asked for leniency. Choose your words carefully. Eric nodded quickly. I'm cooperating. Hannah finally spoke. With whom? Eric hesitated just a beat too long. With the truth. She studied him, really looked at him, and saw what she'd missed before. He wasn't afraid of what he'd done. He was afraid of what he was about to lose. I made mistakes, Eric continued. But I was under pressure. Expectations. My mother. Stop, Hannah said calmly. The word landed harder than shouting ever could. You don't get to hand me pieces of blame like they're gifts, she continued. Say what you came to say. Eric swallowed. They want testimony. About your father. The air changed. James didn't move, but something behind his eyes sharpened. Hannah felt her pulse spike. Testimony about what? Eric leaned forward, lowering his voice. About influence. About how fast things moved once he stepped in. They think, he hesitated, then rushed on. They think this was retaliation. Silence pressed in. Hannah let out a slow breath. So you're offering to lie? I'm offering context, Eric said quickly. They don't understand how powerful your family is. They're looking for leverage. James finally spoke. And you volunteered. Eric's jaw tightened. I need a deal. There it was. If you've ever watched someone rewrite history to save themselves, subscribe. Because accountability terrifies people who've built their lives on excuses. Hannah stood, one hand braced against the table. You abused me, she said. You humiliated me. You endangered our child. Eric's eyes flicked to her stomach. I never touched the baby. She smiled then. Not kindly. You don't get credit for the damage you didn't finish. The officer shifted his stance. Eric's voice cracked. I loved you. No, Hannah said softly. You loved being in control. She turned to leave. Hannah, Eric blurted. If I go down alone, your father goes with me. James rose slowly to his feet. You won't threaten my daughter, he said quietly. Not ever again. Eric laughed, a brittle, hollow sound. You think this system bends for you forever? James met his gaze. It doesn't need to bend. It only needs the truth. Hannah paused at the door. She looked back one last time. You want a deal, she said. Tell them everything. Starting with yourself. Then she walked out. That night contractions began. Not strong. Not regular. But real enough to steal Hannah's breath. Catherine rushed to her side. We're going to the hospital. James was already on the phone. As they drove through the city, Hannah stared out the window, one hand gripping the seat, the other resting over her belly. Not yet, she whispered. Please. At the hospital, doctors moved quickly but calmly. Stress can trigger early labor, one said gently. James stood frozen outside the room, a man who could move markets with a sentence, and couldn't stop this. Hannah closed her eyes. Somewhere across the city, Eric sat in an interrogation room. A recorder clicked on. Mr. Dawson, a voice said. Let's start from the beginning. Eric stared at the red light. He thought of Hannah. Power. A fear. And he smiled. Because if he couldn't control the ending, he would try to burn the story down with him. At the same moment, Hannah cried out. Not in pain but in resolve. Because whatever Eric planned to say next, this child would be born into truth. And nothing terrifies liars more than that. The delivery room was quiet in the way only hospitals could manage. Machines humming softly, lights too bright for the hour, time stretching and folding in on itself. Hannah breathed through the contraction, her fingers digging into the sheet. Stay with me, Catherine whispered, brushing damp hair from her forehead. James stood near the wall, hands clenched so tightly his knuckles had gone white. He had negotiated mergers worth billions without blinking, but this stripped him of every illusion of control. Again, the doctor said gently. Just like before. Hannah pushed. And somewhere between pain and relief, between fear and resolve, she felt something crack open. Not her body, but the part of her that had learned to endure too much in silence. A cry filled the room. Dark. Alive. Undeniable. It's a girl, the nurse announced, smiling. She's strong. Hannah laughed through tears. Real tears this time. The kind that didn't burn. When they placed the baby on her chest, everything else blurred. The past. The humiliation. The rain. None of it could touch this. She's perfect, Hannah whispered. James stepped closer, his voice breaking for the first time in years. Welcome, little one. But even as joy settled in, reality didn't pause. A nurse approached quietly. Miss Hale, there's a call for you. James already knew. Across town, the interrogation room felt colder than it should have. Eric leaned back in his chair, hands cuffed, eyes fixed on the two-way mirror. He'd been talking for hours. Too much, really. Half-truths tangled with outright lies. He thought if he flooded the room, someone might drown in confusion. Let's be clear, the investigator said. You're alleging coercion. Eric nodded. Pressure. From above. From James Hale. Yes. The recorder kept running. What about the financial fraud? Eric shrugged. Mistakes. Desperation. I was trying to keep up. Keep up with whom? Eric smiled faintly. With the life Hannah pretended she didn't have. There it was. Pivot. If you've ever watched someone rewrite a story where they were the villain, subscribe. Because accountability terrifies people who survive by distortion. The investigator leaned back. You're asking us to believe you were manipulated. Eric leaned forward. I'm offering you a bigger name. James listened in silence as his attorney relayed the summary. Eric is pushing the retaliation narrative hard, she said. He's implying your intervention influenced the investigation. James's jaw tightened. And you? I think he's panicking, she replied. But panic can be persuasive if it lands with the wrong person. James glanced through the glass at Hannah and the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms. Contain it, he said quietly. No statements. No leaks. He paused. And prepare the timeline. The internet didn't wait. A speculative article surfaced before dawn. Insider questions speed of Hale Dawson investigation. It didn't accuse. It suggested. And the suggestion was enough. Comment sections are split. Some doubted. Some defended. Some fed on the chaos. Hannah scrolled briefly, then handed the phone back. I won't let this touch her, she said, pressing her lips to her daughter's hair. Catherine nodded. It won't. But James knew better. Truth didn't protect itself. That afternoon Eric made his move. He requested a written statement to be entered into the record. Not through his lawyer. Directly. James read it once. Then again. He exhaled slowly. He's claiming Hannah knew everything, James said. That this was all planned. That the pregnancy was leverage. Hannah looked up sharply. What? He's accusing you, Catherine said softly, fury barely contained. Of entrapment. Hannah laughed. Came out broken. I was trying to survive, she said. I was trying to keep my family together. James placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. And that's exactly why this won't stand. Hannah shook her head. People will believe him. They believe noise, James replied. Until they hear the truth. He turned to his attorney. Release the archive. The attorney hesitated. All of it. All of it. The first document went live an hour later. Timeline. Not emotional. Not defensive. Just facts. Transactions. Medical visits. Messages Hannah had never sent, because she'd never been allowed to speak. Then came the audio. Eric's voice. Recorded months earlier. No one cares what you think, Hannah. You're lucky I put up with you. The reaction was immediate. Brutal. Unforgiving. Public opinion didn't just shift. Snap. If you've ever felt powerless watching someone try to erase your truth, subscribe. Because sometimes the only justice is letting the world hear what was said behind closed doors. Eric watched the feeds from a holding cell. His confidence draining with every notification he couldn't silence. Wait, he snapped at the guard. You can't release that. The guard didn't answer. That night, Hannah stood by the hospital window, rocking her daughter gently. The city glittered below, indifferent and alive. Her name is Lily, Hannah whispered. Because we survived without becoming what hurt us. James joined her. It's not over, he said carefully. Hannah nodded. I know. Her phone buzzed. A single message from an unknown number. He says he has one last thing to trade. And this time it's not about you. It's about your father. Hannah's grip tightened around Lily. Because whatever Eric was planning next, he was desperate enough to go for the only thing left. And desperation made liars reckless. Hannah didn't reply to the message. She handed the phone to James without a word. He read it once, then again, his expression unreadable. He's bluffing, Catherine said immediately. James didn't answer. Bluffs were loud. This was quiet. He doesn't have leverage, Hannah said, though the words felt like something she needed to believe. Everything he knows you already disclosed. James looked at Lily sleeping in her bassinet. Her tiny fingers curled in instinctive trust. People like Eric don't trade facts, he said. They trade timing. The meeting was arranged within hours. Not because Eric deserved it, but because cutting off a desperate man too early could be dangerous. This time Eric appeared on a screen. County detention. Gray walls. No tie. No confidence. But his eyes were sharp. I knew you'd come, Eric said. His voice steadier than it should have been. You asked for this, James replied. Speak. Eric smiled faintly. Not to you. Hannah stepped into view. Eric's smile widened. There she is. If you say one thing about my daughter, James began. Eric raised a hand. Relax. This isn't about the baby. Hannah crossed her arms. Then stop wasting time. Eric leaned closer to the camera. I know about the Shell acquisition in Delaware, he said. The one Hale Global buried 6 years ago. Silence. James didn't move. That was legal, James said calmly. Eric shrugged. Maybe. But it doesn't look clean when you stack it next to expedited audits, frozen accounts, and a public narrative that paints you as a righteous avenger. Hannah felt her stomach tighten, not with fear but anger. You abused me, she said. And this is still about you. Eric's eyes flicked to her. This is about survival. If you've ever watched someone hurt you and then demand protection from the consequences, subscribe. Because accountability feels like cruelty only to people who've never taken responsibility. James spoke slowly. You're attempting extortion. Eric laughed. I'm offering silence. For what? Hannah asked. Eric's gaze hardened. A statement. From you. Hannah frowned. What kind of statement? One where you say this was a misunderstanding, he replied. Where you say emotions ran high. Where you say I was a flawed husband, but not abusive. No, Hannah said instantly. Eric leaned back. Then I talk. About what? James asked. Eric smiled. About how fast justice moves when money gets angry. The screen went dark. Hours later, the first subpoena landed. Not for James. For Hannah. Catherine gasped. They're dragging you into this. James read the document carefully. They're testing pressure points. Hannah nodded slowly. Then they chose the wrong one. But even as she said it, the cost became clear. Depositions. Cross-examinations. Public doubt. She looked down at Lily. I won't let him turn me into a shield, she said. James placed a hand over hers. You won't stand alone. The deposition room was smaller than expected. Neutral walls. Neutral faces. Eric wasn't there, but his presence filled every question. Did you know your father's influence could affect the investigation? Did you anticipate the outcome? Did you remain in the marriage under false pretenses? Hannah answered calmly, truthfully, without flinching. And then came the final question. Mrs. Hale, the attorney said, did you ever consider that by staying silent you were participating in a deception? Hannah paused. The room leaned in. She looked up. I stayed silent because I was afraid, she said. Afraid that speaking would make things worse. Afraid no one would believe me. She took a breath. That silence nearly destroyed me. I won't weaponize it for someone else. The attorney leaned back. The session ended. Outside, James waited. You did well, he said. Hannah nodded, exhausted. It's not over. No, James agreed. That night, Eric watched the deposition summary on a muted television in his cell. He smiled slowly. Because buried beneath the headlines, beneath sympathy and outrage, was something only he noticed. Gap. A single date that didn't align. A document filed too late. He pressed the call button. I'm ready to talk, he told the guard. For real this time. The guard frowned. To whom? Eric's smile widened. To whoever wants to know, he said. What really happened before Hannah ever married me? And miles away, Hannah woke suddenly, heart racing, a cold certainty settling in her chest. Eric wasn't trying to escape anymore. He was trying to rewrite the beginning. And beginnings were the most dangerous places to lie. The courtroom was packed, though no one noticed Hannah stepping in quietly, Lily bundled in her arms. Cameras clicked. Phones rose. Whispers floated like smoke. Every eye was on the woman who had endured 3 years of cruelty and refused to be silenced. Eric sat at the defense table, pale, twitching slightly, a man exposed. His mother fumed behind him, powerless. He looked up as Hannah passed, and for the first time, he saw not fear, not weakness, but unshakable resolve. The judge cleared her throat. We will begin with statements from the plaintiff. Hannah stood, setting Lily carefully in the crib-like bassinet beside her. Every step echoed authority. Every breath carried years of endurance. She spoke slowly, measured. I endured humiliation. I endured abuse. I endured betrayal from the person I trusted most. And I stayed silent, thinking I could protect my child, thinking I could protect myself. She paused, letting the words sink in. But silence is complicity only when someone else chooses to profit from it. I will not let that happen again. A ripple went through the courtroom. Selene's face twisted. Eric's jaw tightened. This wasn't a plea. This was a reckoning. I stayed in that marriage not because of love or fear, Hannah continued. I stayed because I believed in testing character. Not to punish. Not to manipulate. But to reveal the truth. She turned to face Eric fully. You were never ready to see the truth. You only ever wanted to be seen as clever, as in control, as unaccountable. But control built on cruelty is fragile. And your time is over. James Hale's presence was an unspoken power in the room. No one challenged him. No one dared. The prosecution laid out the evidence. Financial fraud, domestic harassment, falsified documents, abusive emails, and witnesses corroborating everything Hannah endured. Every lie Eric had spun unraveled under the weight of fact. Then came the final escalation. Mr. Dawson, the judge said, your actions not only endangered your wife, but also your unborn child. You will answer for every act. Eric's hands shook. He opened his mouth. He tried to justify. Hannah's gaze didn't waver. Save your breath. No excuses will undo the pain you caused. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Public opinion had already turned. Social media posts painting Eric as the villain he always was. People across the city who had doubted, who had sympathized with him, were now calling for justice. Outside the courthouse, cameras captured Selene Dawson exiting with a face drained of color. Every step was a reminder that cruelty without accountability leaves only shame. Back inside, the judge's gavel came down. The court finds sufficient evidence for all charges. Sentencing will occur at a later date. This hearing is adjourned. Hannah gathered Lily in her arms, her face wet with tears. Tears of relief, of release, of survival. James stepped forward, offering his hand, not as a savior, but as a father proud of his daughter's courage. As they walked out, Hannah glanced at the media. She raised her voice, firm, unwavering. Anyone watching this, anyone enduring abuse in silence, your voice matters. You deserve justice. You deserve the truth. You deserve protection. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And if you want to see stories where courage wins, where liars face consequences, subscribe. Because silence protects abusers, but together we make them accountable. Eric was left behind, staring at the courthouse steps, the magnitude of his downfall settling in like cold steel. Every alliance he had counted on had evaporated, every lie exposed, every fear realized. And in that moment, Hannah realized something she hadn't before. Survival wasn't just enduring, it was reclaiming her life, her dignity, and her daughter's future. Lily cooed in her arms, a sound more powerful than any courtroom verdict. Hannah smiled through tears. "We're free now," she whispered. The world outside hadn't changed. The city still moved at the same relentless pace. But for Hannah and Lily, the storm had passed. And the people who once sought to harm her now stood exposed, powerless, defeated by the one thing they could never manipulate: truth. Some people believe cruelty and lies can shield them forever. But power built on fear collapses when faced with courage, truth, and unwavering resolve. Hannah's story reminds us all, no matter how small or powerless you feel, standing up to abuse changes everything. If you've ever been silenced, humiliated, or forced to endure cruelty, remember this: your voice matters, your courage matters, and justice is possible. Subscribe now, because every story like Hannah's proves that darkness cannot hide when the truth comes to light.